Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. If all of our guests in the audience and in the lobby could make your way into the auditorium, we're ready to begin. Okay, friends, good morning all. For our visitors joining us today from outside of state government, my name is Roger Hanshaw. I'm the Speaker of the House of Delegates here in West Virginia State Legislature. And this morning, as we reflect on where we are as a country, realize it is September 11th, 2023. I distinctly remember where I was 22 years ago today, as I imagine many of you do also. That day changed our world in ways that can't be quantified. We are still living the aftermath of that tragic day 22 years later. So before we begin talking about technology that has and will continue to transform our world, I think we should first this morning all rise for a pledge of allegiance to our flag and a moment of silence. The flag is right here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If everyone would please remain standing, we'll observe a moment of silence in honor of September 11th, 2001. Thank you. Let's all be seated. Friends, I live 37 miles from here. My home is 37 miles up I-79. I live off the Walback Interstate exit at exit number 34. And every morning on my way to Charleston, I am a podcast listener. And this morning, when I got in my car and I opened my phone and I began to choose what podcast to play for the 37 miles that I commute to Charleston every day, I scrolled through 7 different shows. 7. Before I found one that was not about generative artificial intelligence. This morning's offerings on the 7 channels to which I subscribe included 7 separate offerings posted today on generative artificial intelligence. If anyone is under the impression that artificial intelligence and generative AI hasn't already changed our world, you're living in a fantasy land. And today we're joined by an incredible panel that will explore for the next 90 minutes the role of artificial intelligence in our world, where we are today, how we got here, and where we're likely to be headed over the short and long term. To moderate today's panel, I am pleased to welcome to the stage Marshall University President Brad Smith.
Come on out, crew. Good morning, everyone. As we get our distinguished panelists aligned in the seats, go ahead and please have a seat. Mr. Speaker, thank you for that kind introduction. We are privileged to be here today to advance our collective understanding and engagement on a topic that promises to be generation shaping and shifting: artificial intelligence and all forms of artificial intelligence. I think the foresight of our legislative leaders once again demonstrates why West Virginia continues to be on the forefront of so many things happening across our country. I was in Ashland, Kentucky earlier today with the 13 states of the Appalachian region and represented by governors there, and there's a lot of conversation about just the things happening in the state of West Virginia. And this is an important time for us to be having this conversation, because we now live in a world that the military describes as a VUCA world, V-U-C-A. That stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It is a current period which requires a lot of agility, rapid experimentation, and a willingness to lean into the unknown. And it couldn't be a more important time for us as a state, because as we're having conversations with people around the country and around the world, they're seeing that West Virginia is indeed a state that is becoming much more agile, willing to lean into the future and to experiment. You've often heard me reference Rudyard Kipling in the book, the Jungle Book, that says the law of the jungle is not that the big eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. And there's never been a more important, game-changing technology, I think, that will come along in our generation than what is currently being described as generative AI. So it's large language models, it's artificial general intelligence, and it is shaping the world around us, as the speaker described. Everywhere you turn, it's touching every corner of society. And we are here today with panelists who represent the companies on the forefront of this, as well as institutions in our own state. And so it's my privilege to facilitate a conversation today that we will all collectively have the opportunity to learn from. Let me do a very quick introduction of who we have on the panel. Sitting first to my right is Jamie Butler. Jamie Butler represents Amazon. He's the Director of Solutions Architecture for U.S. state and local government and education, and is a member of the Amazon Web Services team. So Jamie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Representing IBM to Jamie's right is Suj Paretha. Suj is a distinguished engineer, and she is on artificial intelligence and machine learning in the office of the Chief Information Officer at IBM. We all know IBM has been on the forefront of this for many, many decades, most famously with IBM Watson, but ultimately we're looking forward to hearing from Suj. Welcome, Suj.
Thank you.
To the right of Suj, we have Ryan Palmer. Ryan is known to many of us here in the state of West Virginia. He now represents IBM. And, excuse me, I apologize. Whoa, that's gonna start all kinds of fun up here, isn't it? Yeah, Microsoft, and working with Microsoft in the Global Digital Equity Strategy Group. And so he's basically helping with the Airband team to try to make sure that everyone has access to high-speed internet and meaningful connectivity around the world. You can't have artificial intelligence or generative AI if you don't have connectivity. So it's great to have you here, Ryan. And last but not least is my dear friend, Dr. Amy Seifert from WVU Law School. Amy has been, for the last several years, in fact 4+ years, studying artificial intelligence, the implications on society and on ethics. So it's going to be wonderful to hear from you as well.
Thank you.
All right, so excited. Now, to kick this off, we want to start with a general question. You've heard a lot about all the possibilities of what's going to come about with artificial intelligence, but let's get grounded in the current reality. And let me start and ask everyone to weigh in on this. What would you say is the most promising current application that is out there in the market today that generative AI or artificial intelligence is currently powering that you get most excited about?
So I guess I'll go first. First, thank you, President Smith, for having us here today.
Of course.
And I'd also like to thank President Blair, Speaker Henshaw, and the members of the General Assembly. This is a really important topic, and I'm glad to be part of this. And I think this is the start of that conversation, and it's going to continue to go for a while. I think we're seeing AI used in a lot of things, and it's pervasive across industry. Some of the things I think are really cool are actually how AI can help government be more effective. So we're seeing AI help reduce fraud, we're seeing AI help enhance citizen services, and we're seeing it really improve the way we engage and make our people more effective. So I'll give a really good example, because I think it's always helpful to talk about some of the things our customers are doing. In California, as a result of a real ID, the DMV used AI to help really improve the way they were engaging with the motorists. So our citizens were waiting in lines. It took over 60 minutes to engage with an agent, which meant long lines, and it was really difficult for people to get the services they need. And so the DMV was able to work with Amazon Web Services and use AI to really improve that experience, to use intelligent document processing. And in order to reduce that and turn most of that work into self-service, so that the workers at the DMV were able to really take on the complex things and really improve the way our motorists and our citizens engaged with that service. So I think that was really a great way.
Great examples, Jamie, and very important as we think about as a state trying to become the digital state. Great examples that are pragmatic that are out there today. Thank you. Suj, how about you? What do you see as the current application of AI that's having the greatest impact?
I see many examples of it, Lo, so I will try to share some of them. As you all understand that AI has been very pervasive, and in 2022 alone, the revenue impact of AI has been $87 billion. So that seems like a small number, but it is constantly growing, and from year to year, the impact is constantly increasing at least by 5%. And to talk about how pervasive it has been, I think the top use case that I would talk about is the virtual agents that have been implemented across all the industries. Either they can be chatbots with frequently asked questions, or they can also be conversational AI-based customer support use cases from, take it, financial sector, it can be medical healthcare sectors, and even the government. If I remember correctly, state of West Virginia is also implemented the Watson Assistant technology very impressively. The reason why the virtual agents have been so popular is because it is a low-code, no-code kind of technology, and the technology kind of emulates the human-to-human interactions. So to do that, this technology really makes it very easy to take an example of you have a customer support or IT support scenario where you have 200 people supporting questions across the board, across the world. So whereas if you have a virtual agent that can actually take away that routine work from the human agents and provide 24/7 support. So virtual agents have been prevalent in financial sector to help customers manage their own accounts, make plans for their asset management, prepare before they go into the wealth management agents and so on. Same thing with the healthcare system. Virtual agent, nursing virtual agents and triaging nursing has been very, very popular in the recent times. So it is across the board. That would top my list. The second thing I want to bring to your attention is about something AI and automation working together. We call it intelligent automation. It is combining the capabilities of emulating the human intelligence with AI and providing the task automation with the automation technologies. Pretty soon, AI automation is going to be very powerful in the next 5 years. Actually, more than 80% of the companies across different industries are taking this very seriously. Let me give you a simple example of a business process automation. You have a workflow automation. Supposing there are 10 people, 10 roles, who are participating in that role, right? If you were to introduce AI and automation into that, you can really release 8 people out of that work process. So 80% of the work can be unloaded onto the AI and automation, thus increasing the efficiencies of the processes and leaving the humans to do better things, more high-value work. And this is happening everywhere. Let me give you some interesting examples of where automation, intelligent automation has taken over our lives. We all use sometime or the other, we have done Uber Eats, right? We have done Trivago and TripAdvisor, and we have made reservations for staying in, not in hotels, but elsewhere. And so it is really taking over our lives, and we are benefiting from it very quickly. And before I hand it over, I want to give one more very interesting example as to how AI has really affected 2 fields. One is agriculture. It is not very highly talked about, but AI has actually impacted agriculture with the precision agriculture technologies and techniques, and also the healthcare, precision medicines, drug discovery, or precision surgeries, determining the accurate drugs so there are no fatalities and so on. So these are some areas where automation, AI and automation, and also the virtual agents have been taking over.
Thank you, Suj. You touched on several topics I want to come back and discuss a little bit later, but so far we've heard about improving citizen services, areas like Department of Motor Vehicles, We've heard these virtual assistants, intelligent automation, wonderful applications that are already out there today demonstrating real productivity and efficiency gains. So let me move down the line. Ryan, my friend from Microsoft, I'll get it right.
Thank you.
What would be the things that you see or your company sees that are the most compelling that are happening today?
Well, first of all, President Smith, thank you so much for having me here and for the legislature for bringing this together. It's really wonderful to be back on campus and to be here for this conversation. It's true, like all the things that my colleagues have brought up about how AI can help governments work better and big businesses be more efficient and more productive and workers be more productive, it's true. But I also like to look at it more on a personal level because it can also change lives on a very individual basis. And for me, some of the most exciting applications about AI come around the disability divide. We know we have over 1 billion people in the world today living with disabilities, and progress is being made on making the world and technology more accessible with AI at such a fast pace now that it's amazing. Things are changing every day. And one application that I really find exciting that'll help people change their daily lives is an app that historically was made to help blind and low vision individuals access the world, where they could open it up, turn on their camera, and access volunteers who would say, here's what's in front of you. You're at a metro and your train is coming in 1 minute, or the computer is asking you for a password. But now with AI, in a matter of seconds, that same app and that same individual will be able to pull up their telephone, take a picture, and immediately have a detailed description of what they're looking at. For instance, if I was here and held it up, it would say, you're on a stage in an auditorium with bright lights in your face and a number of people in the crowd who are dressed formally, looking at you. And it could be very detailed and tell you how to then navigate your life. And it's these individual applications that I find sometimes just as exciting as the large, paradigm-shifting applications that we're also talking about. And so AI has the ability to change the way governments work and businesses work and the way people work, but also it has that individual impact on lives. And really specifically in the accessibility divide, it's doing great things already.
Thank you, Ryan. Wonderful example of how it's going to help level the playing field of opportunity for everyone to participate, which is fantastic. Amy, last but not least, I know you've been looking at this space for some time. You're looking at all these areas. What has risen to the top for you in terms of the most practical application today?
Thank you. And thank you also, President Smith, for being here. And thank you, Speaker Hanshaw, for this wonderful invitation. As someone who was born and raised here in the wonderful, great state of West Virginia, it's a real honor to be addressing our lawmakers today, and I appreciate your time and attention. Now, one of the problems with going last is the odds are decent that you might get scooped, and I was just scooped because I was going to give the same visual impairment app example. But let me talk a little bit more about that and also why your role here is so important. I'm really excited about the potential for generative AI and AI in general to help us create a society that is more just, is more equitable, but it also has the potential to further stratify problems in our society or to exacerbate bias. And so much of whether it will lean more toward the promise or more toward the peril will depend on regulation, which is why you all have such a crucial role. So a perfect example is that is an amazing app, and some of the companies that are producing apps like that have had to disable the facial recognition software that was a part of that app because it sort of became a privacy issue. If I could actually hold up my phone and I could know every single one of your names and I could know other links to where your images are on the internet, that might have privacy implications. So these companies have, in some places, by their own corporate governance, said we're not going to do that. Or in other states, it's actually illegal to have that kind of facial recognition software. So I think that what I'm excited about is that this can really help us develop and grow a better society, but it's all going to come down to how we choose to use it, and a lot of that will depend on how you choose to regulate it. So I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm honored by the presence of my fellow panelists, and so excited that they're here in West Virginia with us.
Thank you, Amy. Each one of you alluded to the efficiency gains, the productivity, and that leads to potential implications to the workforce. There are moral and ethical conversations and debates and some dilemma out there in terms of things I've heard, which is 10 people doing a job, 8 of them will no longer need to do that job, so they have the opportunity to up-level or upskill or find new ways to add value. I've also heard that generative AI will not replace jobs, but those who actually know how to use generative AI will take jobs away from those who don't. So I'd love to get your perspective, and Sue, since you offered this, let me start with you first. What do you see as the workforce implications, and what would be a smooth transition for employers to ensure that their employees are able to participate in this next chapter with generative AI?
Thank you. It's a very important topic. As I started my conversation about the impact of AI, I also think that AI is here to stay. It brings with it really great benefits of human efficiency and productivity in business operations. We cannot deny that. At the same time, if I can give you some metrics and statistics about what the World Economic Forum has predicted in 2020, actually, they said by 2025, 2 years from now, we are going to lose, AI is going to take over about 85 million jobs away from people, right? So most of these jobs, by the way, are manual tasks, by the way, right? And in the same report, Economic Forum also said that AI is also going to create 95 million jobs, right? Folks try to focus more on the AI taking away the jobs and so on. There are two sides to losing jobs. I think if you look at the jobs that will be replaced by AI, there are more manual tasks, such as farm resources labs or customer support jobs or in-person support jobs and things like that. It is not going to really take away the other important jobs, such as, we are still going to have professors, we are still going to have professors and doctors and engineers and so on. So it is not going to impact every job. So I think that we should actually, instead of protesting AI, we should embrace the value that the AI will bring. And to your question about how do we transition from that is a really big number, 85 million jobs losing in 2 years. How do we handle that? I think it's a responsibility of both the employers as well as the employees, right? When you look at some of the statistics, the employees themselves, they're very happy that they don't have to do many of these manual tasks. They're happy that there is automation available to them. Having said that, so I want them to, we should be re-strategizing their skill set and roles within the organization, right? Upskill, reskill, and don't be afraid of AI. AI is not here to manage us. We, as the human beings, the intellectuals, right, the creative folks, we are the ones who will be actually managing AI on how we will leverage it, how we will embrace it, right? So re-strategizing their role, understanding how to apply the AI to their specific immediate work is very important. The second part, I would say, is the employers themselves. The first thing that I want all business owners and employers is to recognize that AI is here to augment human intelligence and efficiencies, never to replace them. I have to be very strong in saying never. That is my very strong opinion, right? Once you believe that it is here to augment, then, and I want them to also apply AI with a simple acronym, ERT, ethical, responsible, and trustworthy AI. Everybody talks about it, right? Sometimes you have 5 principles, sometimes you have 3 and 7. Doesn't matter, but it has to be ethical, responsible, and trustworthy AI. I also want the employers not just to invest in technologies, invest in your people, because tribal knowledge, the experience, the creativity is something that you cannot replace with the technologies. So you want to reskill, have plans to reskill your employees so they can handle the AI technologies in a very responsible manner. Those are some of my ideas.
Wow, wonderful. Wonderful statistics too. 85 million jobs in the next 2 years. will be impacted by AI if not replaced, but 95 million new jobs. And when you talk to the employees who are having this impact them, they're actually more encouraged and excited because it's replacing the manual tasks,
Yeah.
and they're having an opportunity to participate in more higher value-added ways, which is exciting, which means the employers need to step up. And I love the ERT, ethical, reliable, trustworthy. Fantastic. Let me ask other panelists, any implications you want to add to what Sue's just offered in terms of implications for the workforce or how we can smooth that transition?
I could jump in real quickly and just double down on the notion of skilling. Right? We need to continue to, all of us, come along on this journey and become, myself included, on this journey right now, becoming better at using AI to be more productive and efficient at work. And that allows me to be more creative and to think differently when you're able to take some of those tasks and have AI handle them for you. You know, I think about, one example I like is a radiologist. AI can help look at x-rays and flag issues, but you're always going to need a radiologist to make that assessment and determine what the diagnosis is. It can free him up or her up to do more work, but it's still vital to have that human doing the analysis at the end. But it certainly can help them do better. Or when it comes to medical records, you know, AI is freeing up doctors to spend more time with patients because they don't have to go through thousands and thousands of documents to understand the history of the patient. They can type in one keyword in a matter of seconds, have their answer and the information they need at their fingertips. So there are ways every day that AI is augmenting and improving practices so we can in many ways be more human and more engaged one-to-one and drive that impact. And so it is key that the skilling resources are accessed, they continue to evolve, and that employers and employees around the world are leaning in to really embrace that.
Thank you, Ryan. Let me shift to the next question. And Amy, I'll start with you so you don't get scooped this time. We'll move up the talent readiness pipeline to educators, to the education system, and to workforce training, community and technical colleges. What do you think we need to be doing in education to prepare the next generation to participate in this world with artificial general intelligence and generative AI?
Well, I love that question. So let me start by sharing what I'm doing at the law school, and then we'll talk about what we should all be doing. We've really been a leader at WVU Law. I've taught artificial intelligence for 4 years now, and we were talking in my class about GPT-3, which is a precursor to ChatGPT before ChatGPT ever came out. So we've been leading at WVU Law, trying to produce the next generation of lawyers who understand the ethical, responsible, professional way to use artificial intelligence. And I think that what's really important, and President Smith, I'm sure you would agree with me, is for our universities to lead on this topic. You know, WVU, we're a public land grant institution, which means that we serve the people of all 55 counties of this state. And I take that really seriously. I try to accept as many speaking engagements as I possibly can to educate folks in the community on AI and help them be aware of things. Earlier this month, I was here in Charleston presenting to the West Virginia Press Association with thoughts that journalists should keep in mind about generative AI. And I've had meetings with our extension office about what we could be doing that is even more. And so I think it's really important for the universities to lead. You know, we have these repositories of knowledge. I always say that I'm paid by the people of West Virginia to go learn all of the things that I have learned in my research. And so I then owe it to the people of West Virginia to freely share that knowledge in ways that benefits them. So I think that if we can do more as universities, if we can try to be more present in the community, if we can think about what does the everyday West Virginian need to know about these topics and how can we provide that education, that's a really important starting place. And as the parent of 3 school-aged kids in public school in Morgantown, it's also really important to me that our public schools, our K through 12, be leading also, and that we're providing teachers with the support they need to integrate lessons in the classroom and to help support the incredibly important work that they're doing also.
Thank you, Amy. And Jamie, let me ask you, I know Amazon Web Services is doing a lot in the field of education, so what are you seeing as best practices out there for educators to be considering?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things I've seen recently is really about personalized learning and doing skills assessment, using AI to understand where a student's at, what areas of knowledge they come into the classroom with, and then where their gaps are and how they, how they need to understand a set of domain knowledge to master a particular concept or a course. And so AI is really helping to do that assessment and then create personalized and learning paths for those students so that it really levels the playing field. And I was talking with a math professor of mine who's doing this today, and he said it's transformative the way that you can bring in students from all walks of life that start at different baselines when they come into a class. And some students come in and end up bored with the content because they may have already known some of that, and other students get left behind because the class is progressing too quickly. And so this adaptive education can really help students level the playing field and all arrive at an understanding and mastery of the material. I'll add one more thing I think is really interesting. So AWS is using machine learning, and we've turned it into a game to really help students across the globe learn machine learning. It's called the Deep Racer League for Students. And so what we've done is we've taken a robotic car and a whole suite of tools to enable students to learn machine learning. We provide 20 hours a month, 20 hours of education around machine learning, and then enable them to do processing in the cloud to build models and train them. And then they actually get to compete in a gamified league for prizes. And so it's just a great way to get students really excited about STEM education, about participating, continuing to further their own education.
Wonderful examples, Jamie. I'll share a couple things that we've experienced at Marshall University. So over the spring and summer, we had all of our cabinet read the book Impromptu by Reid Hoffman. If you have not read the book or you're trying to get up to speed on generative AI, this book is co-authored by Reid Hoffman, who is a co-founder of LinkedIn and one of the original founders of PayPal, and he co-wrote it with ChatGPT. So he literally has the artificial intelligence helping him write the book. And it is an incredible understanding of what generative AI is, but you also see how he advances the prompts he writes. So we went through that with Cabinet. We took our Board of Governors through it, but most importantly, we invited high school students from all counties across the state to come in with us over the summertime. And we were blown away. As the speaker said, it's already here. These are 10th, 11th, and 12th graders using tools like PhotoMath and Brainly and Snapchat AI and others, and showing us how they're using it to advance their own learning and getting personalized learning to complement their teachers, not to cheat. In fact, they kept saying, look, we want people to know we're using it. We want to show you how we're using it, but we need you to embrace it. And they did have some schools that were saying you're not allowed to use it, and we said, has that stopped your behavior? And the answer was no, it hasn't. And so this is one of those things. There's a famous quote, never lean away from the future because the future will always win. It's really coming at us here in education, and how do we lean in and embrace this as a tool will be very, very important. So great examples. We talked a little bit about healthcare, but I'd like to probe on cybersecurity. Now you have this powerful tool. How will it help us both be more protective of privacy and security, but also what could be the downside risk? And I'll open it up to anyone who wants to start. So the impact of generative AI in the field of cybersecurity.
I can start with cybersecurity. It seems to be a battle that we are constantly battling for several years, I would say. And the attackers always seem to be one step ahead of us, even with the advent of different types of technologies. But I think with the onset of the generative AI, the self-learning capabilities and so on, we can really put it to a good use in improving the attacking the attackers or stopping them before they start the attack and so on. One of the examples that I'm focusing on right now is the data poisoning that happens quite a lot. What happens is the attackers take your training data and ingest the false misleading data into that. So when you build the model is not performing correctly. So there are multiple models out there that we can actually really leverage. One of the models that, let me get a little bit technical here, is called UDA, unsupervised domain adaptation. So because the attackers are actually ingesting false data, we actually train the models by taking the very well-trained data and then putting it into a target database where it is not at all trained. So the model, through the self-supervised learning approach, understands the nuances of very well-trained and, data that is ingested with false information and so on. So this approach, UDA approach, works quite well actually. And this is where I really want us to lean in and work with research closely. All of our companies and organizations have both the research as well as the practical products available. This is where we need to work in synchronization, work with the researchers. And there are variety of, I have realized that there are 100+ models that can be brought into bear to work in the cybersecurity. I'm just giving one simple example, and simulating the attacks. With generative AI, it's going to be far better than the regular statistical way of approaching the data. So I think we should be open-minded about leveraging the AI, generative AI technologies, and encourage the students to give them these as examples, and ask them to come up with different solutions. These are all important areas where we can bring the employees as well as the students and research graduates to do research in and help us. So that way, you are working with the research, you are working with the educational committees, and also productizing them. So we will be one step ahead of the attackers.
Great examples. Other examples from the other companies or WVU, what you've seen in terms of how generative AI is being applied in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. I've got an interesting one. So I think we're seeing AI being really helpful in discovering really complex security threats, especially when you think about attacking the bad actors that are attacking across entities. And so being able to correlate data and really understand how the attacks are happening and be able to then help inform our security professionals to respond very quickly so they can actually get to the root of the problem and fix it. We're also seeing some really interesting stuff, and I'll talk about a project we just worked on, one of our cloud innovation centers. And if you're not familiar with the Amazon Cloud Innovation Centers, we partner with universities to really think through and then build software solutions that impact public good. And one of the projects that just came out of our Cloud Innovation Center was around an CISO, so Chief Information Security Officer. And the idea was, how can we improve K-12 and local government security where a lot of these attacks are happening, especially when we think about ransomware and attacks like that. And so this My CISO, what it does is it's a very conversational chatbot with the folks at these K-12 institutions or local governments, and asks them just a series of questions to understand their security posture. And very conversational. At the end, the questions are all aligned to the NIST cybersecurity framework, and it gives the school or the government a report on how well they're doing, areas for improvement, and then it allows other folks to really target and improve security for those folks so that they don't have. So it's a lot about prevention.
Two wonderful examples. I'll share two as well. This summer, I had the chance to attend the new president's orientation at Harvard. It's the only way I could get into Harvard, is I was now a president, so I get to go. And I was there with superintendents from some of the military branches, and so we had the superintendent for the U.S. Marine Corps and also for the Coast Guard Academy. And for the first time this year in their leadership program for cybersecurity, they have artificial intelligence as a student. And that AI is participating along with live students and trying to play the red team. So what can we do to actually break the model, which is forcing the rest of the leaders in the room to really come back with a counteroffensive, which was pretty interesting. And so it caused us to step back and say at Marshall University, how do we think about incorporating that into our own curriculum and really keep pushing our thinking? The second is last night, sitting there watching national news and preparing for this panel, I saw a new company that just come out that attaches itself to the security cameras in K-12 school systems right now that can identify through visual recognition a weapon, so a knife, a pistol, a rifle, and then automatically alerts the local police as well as starts to move things into lockdown, and it actually accelerates the time that you can respond and prevent something from happening. So these are sort of ideas where generative AI are now playing in the space of security and cybersecurity. Pretty interesting. So let me open up with, this will be the last round of this particular section, but I'm going to ask you to get in a time machine and look 10 years out. We've talked about the practical applications today, but knowing the velocity of change is accelerating. If you said 10 years from now, what are the kinds of advances that you can see happening that are very probable, if not predictable, as a result of generative AI? What are going to be the biggest transformational changes you envision? And Ryan, I want to start with you, buddy.
Sure. I mean, I thank you for that question, and I think that a lot of it depends on what type of AI governance structure we're able to implement over those next 10 years. What is that paradigm going to look like? Is that going to allow for the transparency and the public-private partnerships across governments and private industry and academia to come together and learn and drive those innovations? So whatever they're going to be, what I really think we need to continue to focus on, how are we going to make sure that we have the structures in place to make sure the data is protected, the individuals are protected, and that so we can all go on this journey, transparent journey together. But with that, the sky's the limit. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg now. I love hearing all these individual use cases, and what you just said is such an exciting way that it can make the world a better place. And I think to your point, and to your point as well, it's going to be the younger generation that drives this innovation. They're thinking of things that I would never think of. They're thinking of applications and ways to improve lives that wouldn't be first nature for me. So it's so exciting that we're going to be able to lay the groundwork that will allow for this, all of us going in together and reaching these new possibilities. What it is, it's beyond my recognition, beyond my imagination, quite frankly. It's not just going to change the world, it could, quite frankly, change the universe we live in. And I'm just excited to see where it goes.
Beautiful.
I could give some examples. And I think the science and medicine is going to see the biggest proliferation with the generative AI. We are going to see a lot of drug discovery, new molecular generation, etc. They are very quietly working, but they are really coming up with a lot of innovative capabilities, right? Just imagine when COVID happened, when the medicine that we needed, that cannot be generated in 20 years. It typically takes a vaccine to be created in 20 years. It doesn't happen in 20 months or 2 months. And generative AI capabilities will help us there in creating new drugs faster and new molecular medicines, etc. That is one. I also think the rise of the robotics is impending. We are seeing more and more use of robotics in different places. That is going to be mainstream in the next 10 years. I talked about AI and automation. It is actually called a digital labor. I think digital labor is really going to take over in the next 10 years. So I call it the dual labor, the humans and digital labor working together. That is inevitable, I would say. And autonomous cars. By 2030, I believe 1 out of every 10 cars is going to be self-driving car.
Wow. I love when you put it out there that specific. 1 out of 10 by 2030, huh? And digital labor, very interesting concept, but it's augmented with human intelligence. So you have both working side by side. Mm-hmm. I'm always reminded, I go back and look at the census in the United States in the 1900s, and roughly half of the United States reported their primary occupation as agrarian, agriculture, farming.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And the last census, it was less than 2%. But the food production and the full employment have never been greater than they are right now. So to your point, we have machines come in and do a lot of the work that we may have used to do, but now we've found other ways to add value. And I love that digital labor concept complemented with humans. So let's get other future predictions here. 10 years from now, the greatest implications that you can see generative AI creating and bringing to the world.
I'm going to agree with Ryan and be inspired. And it's hard for me to say 10 years out because given the makeup of our crowd here, let me take us back to 1996. And you have a burgeoning internet And Congress wanted to make sure they could protect that internet industry. And so they passed the Communications Decency Act, which included Section 230 that a lot of you know about and is very popular in the news. I think if you had asked that Congress to envision what 2006 would have brought and the start of social media and other things that are implicated in Section 230, they would not have been able to go there. So it's hard for me to think 10 years from now. We're in such an exponential growth curve right now with generative AI. I mean, it's just stunning, the speed. Stunning and a bit scary to me. I sometimes wonder if all of these are ready for prime time, but I can come back to that later. But it's hard to imagine what things will look like 10 years from now. And so I guess your job as legislators is to craft regulation that is nimble and then to look back on it and to be willing to sunset it and update it and do other things that I think would be important, because I want their companies to succeed. Their companies are doing tremendous things, and I want them to succeed, and I want them to be incentivized to do it so that it's great for all of us. And so I think it's hard for me to imagine 10 years what it would look like for the products, but I would love to imagine what our regulation looks like in 10 years. And that is something that allows industry to thrive in ways that is great for society and protects it from some of the less desirable applications.
I love that, Amy. Jamie, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I'll echo Amy's comment that it's hard to predict the future. So things are changing so quickly, and to that point, what would things have looked like 10 years after the internet was created? I'll answer it a couple of different ways, which is I think the internet democratized access to knowledge, and we saw that. And then now we're seeing the revolution of cloud democratizing access to help industries and companies really leverage computing infrastructure. And I think AI is going to democratize access to technology for everybody. And that's really the power of what we're seeing today, is that anybody can use technology and doesn't have to be a technologist to start to engage with this technology and use it. So we're going to start to see it become more pervasive and in things that we do every single day and helping us be more productive. We talked about a little bit earlier about jobs and how we're making people more effective. I want to ask the group with a show of hands, does anybody here like waiting on calls for a call center to get help? Anyone done that? I mean, call centers, you can wait an hour, 2 hours for help on a call center. And a lot of that technology now is being automated with AI, so that when you call in, you can self-service, you can use automated processes to get to the answer you need quickly. And then the people that are doing the work can be more effective and actually work on the hard problems. At the end of the day, everybody goes home happy. The consumer, the citizen who's looking for that service is happy they had a much better experience. And the people that are doing the work are engaged, and they're doing something that's challenging and fun instead of routine, just doing the same thing over and over again. So I think that's kind of the future.
I love it, Jamie. I also love how you invoked your inner Yogi Berra there. Predictions are hard, especially about the future, which is great. We've talked a lot about the upside, the excitement, the things that are happening, the 10 years out. But there are limitations today. There are shortcomings. There are unintended consequences. So what are the limitations of generative AI today that you think are the biggest problems we're going to have to tackle?
I can start on that one. I think about this a lot, and we know that AI systems have the potential to produce biased outputs, and that's simply because it's hard to find a data training set that doesn't have bias in it, and so it's hard to produce an output if you're trained on an input that that has some bias in it. And so I think being aware of that, companies that are producing large language models are certainly aware of that. They're building in guardrails, which is great, but those can be, people can jailbreak those, and so we have to be aware of that. I also think there's a more kind of, there are two more philosophical problems that I note. One is using a system for something other than what it was designed for. So when I talk with data scientists about things like recidivism prediction tools, which I've written about, and which are algorithms often fueled by machine learning, excuse me, that are at use in our court system now that help predict how likely a defendant is to reoffend, and therefore help predict how long of a jail sentence someone should have. Those systems weren't necessarily designed for that work, and people are often concerned when they hear that that's an application that's being used. So I worry about those. But then the larger philosophical thing I worry about is that if we're not careful, generative AI, like large language models, can in some ways undercut human creativity. I so agree with Suj that they should and can be used to allow humans to be even more creative. But I tell my law students, we are using ChatGPT in my appellate advocacy course this semester, but we're using it in a really specific way. I don't want them to skip the first draft. I don't want them to miss out on the opportunity to see the holes in their logic and realize where they need more research. And I want them to know that they're more creative than an AI system is, and that that system should help them think about how the law should grow and change rather than telling them that. So I worry on a philosophical level that if we overly rely on these tools, we lose some of that innate human creativity and that ability to get better, which all of us have experienced through the hard work of doing draft after draft after draft. So I love these tools. I love that we can use automation for things that are kind of drudge work for humans, but I always want to make sure we're not overly relying on them. And we remember that at the end of the day, creation is a human endeavor, and creativity is a human characteristic, and these tools should support that rather than supplant that.
Wonderful, wonderful examples. Others where you see limitations, shortcomings in generative AI that we need to wrestle with, figure out how to overcome.
Absolutely, there are a few, right? As humans, as I mentioned before, we are very creative people, we are intellectuals, we have experiences, we bring a lot of these together in making those decisions. The AI does not have the ability to inference, it does not have the ability to do the decisions, make the decisions themselves. You need human in the loop, you need human in the middle to make those decisions. AI is there to process volumes and petabytes of information to arrive at and provide that information to us so we can make that decision, right? The creativity is lacking. The other problem that I see with generative AI, wherever there is information, its inability to recognize the inherent, maybe potentially inherent unfairness, right? The bias that could be there. It cannot filter it out. We can train it to do that, but it is something that I want us to strive to work towards, to making these generative AI models along with the traditional AI. We have done quite a lot of work with the traditional AI to make sure the models that we build are trustworthy, right, are explainable, are protective of the data privacy and so on. We have to do something very similar with the generative AI also. So there is equitable value with the generative AI across the globe.
Thank you. Others?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that at Microsoft, Brad Smith, it's our Brad Smith, not you.
Yeah, that's Brad number one. That's why I had to insert a D in the middle of my initial 20 years in the tech sector.
Well, our Brad Smith says in both his books, Tools and Weapons, and I've heard him say it elsewhere, that don't ask what computers can do, ask what they should do. And I think that's important as we look forward to the problems that we could encounter with AI, or challenges that come along with it. It's not enough to focus only on the opportunities that AI has to improve our lives. We need to think early and often about the challenges and the problems that lie ahead so we can plan accordingly and put the policies in place to get ahead of those problems. We talked about the need for transparency, not only with the public, but especially with academia. So we're all learning and partnering together as we go on this journey. But to me, a really big, important step there in proper governance is safety brakes, especially when we're talking about AI and public infrastructure. Because we know that AI is going to have the ability, and already does in some circumstances, to help us manage and run our electric grid more efficiently and better, or manage public water systems in a way that's to the benefit of everyone. But they need to operate within the way that they should and not the way that they can. And that requires consistent and constant human interaction with these systems and making sure that they're growing in the right way. So anything we do, we need to keep those principles in mind. And that's something we've thought a lot about at Microsoft. We have a blueprint on AI governance, which is out there, which I think provides a lot of these steps that we all are agreeing on here that need to be put in place so we can advance safely and together on these issues.
Wonderful. Jamie, anything you would add?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is I think there's a lot of it's about education too, and ensuring that we're educating the next generation of practitioners that are going to be doing this work. so that they're prepared, they have the knowledge, the tools, and the understanding of what they should and should not be doing, and that they come into the workforce ready to help us really accelerate. Some of the things that we've been doing, we're actually creating online classes through our AWS Skill Builder to help upskill those folks who are interested in learning AI and ML. And we've also made a pledge to train and educate 29 million people globally on cloud skills at no cost using our stuff. So we really want to help continue to invest in training and educating the next generation of a workforce.
That's wonderful, wonderful. So let me shift quickly to data privacy. So how do we strike the balance between data-driven innovation and individual privacy? And I see your head nodding down there, Amy. I want to start with you. I'm sure you spent a lot of time thinking through this.
I have. It's hard. There are existing data privacy laws, though I would argue that they're insufficient and they're somewhat patchwork. We can look to other models. For example, the EU has arguably done more for data privacy than we have right now in the US. There's a role for the court systems. So I know that there are lawsuits currently against certain generative AI companies arguing that the scraping of the data that was taken to train the data training sets that produce these large language models violated certain state data privacy laws. So I think as we're thinking through all of this, we have to shift our way of thinking, right? We have to stop thinking about costs as, well, this is a free program and therefore there are no costs. We have to think of our own data as really valuable, and we have to think of our own privacy as really valuable. And when we consider that our data and our privacy are valuable, then I think we're more likely to protect them. It's always striking to me that younger generations just have a different relationship to privacy than some of us might. And so I think it's especially important, and we do have some good child online privacy laws, and it's important that those be enforced pretty strictly. But I think that we have to consider who owns data and who should own data, who should benefit from data. Data shouldn't be thought of as something that is free or is valueless. Our data, and especially the data of the people, your constituents, it's really valuable. And so anytime you're considering regulation, I would urge you to put a premium on protecting data privacy, giving people lots of opt-out options or opt-in options and other things like that, and making sure that companies are being careful with data, which is a very valuable commodity.
And Amy, I want to make sure I just get the takeaway there as we're thinking about policy, thinking about challenging companies and institutions to ensure that decision resides with the individual end user, as opposed to trying to regulate, here's how much data we think you should or shouldn't give?
That's exactly right, President Smith. And I use the term excuse me. I use the term opt-in intentionally. Sometimes, and I understand why companies and developers would do this, but oftentimes your data is simply available unless you opt out. But a lot of people don't know how to opt out. How many of you actually read the terms and services before you accept them, right? It's complicated, I get it. So I think challenging companies to think about, well, really, data privacy should be something that that's the default. And they have to opt in to tracking. They have to opt in to the data collection. They have to opt in to these other things. That could be a really helpful paradigm shift. So instead of saying, unless somebody tells us not to, we're taking your data, I think instead it should be, unless you are explicitly giving us permission in a way that is outside of terms and conditions of service, that would be a really helpful thing that I would consider as a regulator, is making sure that the data privacy protections are really clear and that people have to opt in to having their data taken.
Thank you. Thank you for drawing that distinction. Jamie, let me ask you, how's Amazon and Amazon Web Services thinking about this?
Well, I'll start with, this is really not my area of expertise. I focus mostly on helping customers implement technology. So I'm happy to kind of pull in the right people from Amazon to work on that particular question. But I'll add this one thing, which is I read an interesting article in Politico recently where one of Amazon's senior leaders, Michael Punk, was interviewed, and they asked about how are we thinking about responsible AI. And I think it really comes down to, one of the things I liked about the article was that it comes down to a multidisciplinary approach, really getting the right people in the room to have the conversation to ensure that we've got a good public and private partnership, the right folks thinking about this problem and making sure that the things that we're doing really enable innovation and the practical use of technology.
I love it. In fact, I'd like to, Sue, you have your hand up. I know you also mentioned ERT, so I suspect you have a good perspective on this. Let me yield to you.
Absolutely. Data privacy is a super important topic, right? Data privacy infringement continues to happen, even with the policies that we have, the regulations and the governance, and so it doesn't seem to stop. I agree that it should not be an afterthought. It should be, we should start with the data privacy. There is NYC laws, there is GDPR, and so on. But however, I think we may need to take another step in terms of productizing those capabilities of protecting the data privacy through the product capabilities itself. The policies and governance themselves cannot stop it completely. So leveraging some of the, leaning into some of these emerging technologies, including the generative AI. There are some modeling techniques called pattern extraction techniques, etc., that can be leveraged to fool the people who are trying to steal the private data, right? We create noise, we take the regular data and we ingest some noise about the personal information about the person, and the attackers will be very confused as to which is the private data and which is not. So there are several emerging techniques that are available to us. So policy is super important. Governance is equally important, but productizing some of these features with the latest technologies could be super important as well.
Wonderful.
I would just add on, President Smith, that we support, much like was that advanced here during session last year, strong, comprehensive privacy framework as we move forward. We must protect everyone's data, at the same time put the guardrails in place so the private industry knows the rules of the road. And I think that starts with individual empowerment, much like you mentioned. People should have the ability to access, edit, and even delete their data that they own. And that's part of the transparency that we keep coming back to. That's a big part of it. At the same time, there needs to be corporate responsibility and enforcement authority. So when companies or others misuse the data and don't play by the rules, there need to be real consequences to keep everyone in line.
I love it. I'd like to pick up, there's 2 questions left, so this will be the first of the last 2 questions. This interdisciplinary collaboration, each of you referenced it in some way. So we're talking about engineering and technology, we're talking about policy, we're talking about legal, we're talking about ethics, we're talking about human resources. All of these get impacted by this transformational technology that's happening. What are the practical ways that your organizations are building that into the way you're developing your tools and your technologies? So how are you building interdisciplinary collaboration in so you're thinking about all aspects of generative AI?
One way I know that our company is doing it is through working with universities directly, providing resources not only for students, but for professors and for others to learn how to use AI better, to learn how to incorporate it into their classes and their lesson plans, but do it in a way that's productive, in a way that's learning together and bringing everybody along. So continuing to build out new resources. And we have an AI skills initiative that is continuously updated and new resources are added, and that's only going to continue. And that's just one aspect of how we'll be able to help skill the students, but also we want to bring along the researchers that are working at the universities. So we're doing it together and providing transparent, accurate access to our models and to the logic that we're using also plays a big role in that. But that's an important part of the future.
It's a great example.
Again, going next is hard because we got scooped, but a lot of that is very similar for us too. Working with universities, working with kind of the smartest minds and brains that are tackling these problems today, and doing things like this, where we're having these open conversations and trying to ensure that we're helping to provide the visibility to the technology and what it can do so that we're using it responsibly.
Great. Suj?
We have done something very interesting and innovative at IBM recently. We all know that generative AI is a brand new area. We know that you can use it for text generation, code generation, and wide variety of other generative capabilities. But when it actually comes to leveraging, understanding the value of it, it takes quite some time when you have a brand new technology like this. So we had a code challenge across the company where 200,000 people participated, and we were all hands-on the technology in solving problems. A core set of use cases that we have taken, and we started solving it individually in group-wise, applying the AI, generative AI technologies in conjunction with the traditional AI. It was a massive effort. I was not sure how well we were going to fare it, but we did it very well. What happened was when you are collaboratively trying to understand the technology by using it, by not just talking about it, by using it. And when we were doing that, I made sure that we were adhering to the ERT principles, right? Make sure that you are applying it ethically and responsibly and so on. That actually gave us an opportunity to elevate that learning very quickly in a very short time. So I think that kind of experiments are important. Practical experience with these emerging technologies is super important. And continuing that in the responsible adoption at the domain level, at the organization level, at the corporate level, and so on.
Thank you, Suj.
Yeah, and I just would add that I think when I start the first week of my artificial intelligence and law class, we watch a TED Talk by Dr. Rachel Thomas entitled AI Needs All of Us. And I think that's such an important concept, this idea that artificial intelligence needs certainly technical people, mathematicians, data scientists, others, but it also needs philosophers and lawyers and other people. In 2 weeks, I'll be giving a presentation to our philosophy department. And I think that the more of us who are at the table, the better the resulting policy, the better the outcomes. And I always encourage folks, you don't have to know exactly how to do the hard technology behind this, right? Like I can tell you how ChatGPT works roughly until we get to the T. That stands for transformer architecture, and then I am lost. But I understand enough to be able to say, here are some of the pros and cons, and to speak up and share my voice. And a lot of what I consider my role at the law school is educating judges and lawyers and others so that they understand enough to be asking the right questions and seeking the right outcomes. So don't be intimidated, right? I was a creative writing major in college, and here I am talking about this stuff. It really does need all of us. No one can afford to sit this one out.
I love that. It's actually the perfect segue, Amy, into the last question. Sitting in the audience, we have legislative leaders, policymakers. They're also parents, they're business people, they're educators, they're legal experts, all kinds of different hats we wear. What would be the best tip you would give individuals in the audience to stay informed and abreast of what's happening around us so that they would have a perspective to offer when it comes to things like developing policy? So what resources would you point them to? Books, videos? How would you stay abreast of what's happening?
I can start. Thank you, President Smith. I referenced earlier our blueprint for AI governance, which has a lot of great information on how we're thinking about the future of AI and how it can and should be regulated, as well as we were talking about resources for individuals. Continually on the Microsoft AI Skills Initiative, we have new opportunities to learn, new resources out there that are always being updated. And I know our colleagues from other companies do have similar wonderful tools out there, so I would encourage you to access those, use those. They're made to be, to help you on your journey, and they're going to continue to be updated and have more resources. So just continue to look there at Microsoft on the issues, or our LinkedIn page where we have these skills, or anywhere. Just be curious. Continue to be curious and learn, because it is a learning process. It's not like you check a box and now you're an expert and you're good to go forever. So it's a journey we're all on.
Great.
I can take it.
Suj, yes.
So I think adoption of AI at an organization has to be a multidisciplinary effort. It should not just, it should include the business decision makers, it should include the thought leaders, the technology thought leaders, the research also should be participating in that in conjunction with the local and the federal government policies and so on. I'm a big fan of AI Bill of Rights. Let me put it out there, but it is a beautiful blueprint of how to responsibly apply AI for humans without affecting them differently. So, you want a multidisciplinary team of people that provide the guidance on how to adopt, how to learn and implement and adopt AI. You need advocates, AI advocates, you need focal area folks, etc., and also the tools. There are several tools that you can develop. For example, algorithmic assessment. Impact of the algorithmic assessment is a very important topic where you will be building models, but you want to make sure that those algorithms are not being biased, right? Unfair, and so on. So you go ahead and build the model. So how do you assess to make sure that the models are not biased, right? Those kinds of checkpoints are very important, and so the advocates and the focal points, etc., can take a very active role in doing those things. So the policies and governance should be trickling down from top to bottom, and everyone should participate in that. I think those are some of the things that I would recommend.
And Suj, I missed one point. You said you were a very big fan of a wonderful blueprint, and I missed what that blueprint was. What's that tool that they could look to?
It is the AI Bill of Rights I'm talking about that was recently announced.
The AI Bill
AI
of Rights.
Bill of Rights.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jamie?
Yeah, so I'll start with learn and be curious. And I heard Ryan start to mention this earlier. Learn and be curious is a leadership principle and part of our culture at Amazon. And so it's one of the things we continue to do and we really push our entire company to do. So I was sitting here trying to think of the one or two things that I actually use, and I don't know that I have the one or two. I have the lots of things. I'm constantly looking at and reading different articles, trying to understand both sides, or not just both sides, but all sides of the discussion. So I'm keeping myself informed. We have some really amazing thought leaders at Amazon that are really focused in this space. And we have videos as well as blog posts and white papers from those amazing leaders that talk about this in depth. And so I encourage you to go to the Amazon.com website and look up some of those things and read the white papers, read those and watch those videos, because it gives a very good understanding and breaks down a lot of those concepts into everyday language, so it's easy to understand as you're thinking about the practical application of those technologies.
Wonderful. Amy, you get the closing one on this one.
All right. Well, I mean, President Smith, I think you'll appreciate this. I'll go back to universities having an important role to play here, that we should be hosting events like this. We should make them open to the public. We should have opportunities for people who want to learn more to Zoom into a lecture if that's something that they're interested in. I love the idea of be curious. I listen to so many different podcasts about this topic. I read lots of different things because, again, it's important to get multiple perspectives, multiple points of view that will really help inform you. And I think that if you feel like, gee, I've tried that and it was a little over my head, there are some really good podcasts and TED Talks that are aimed at beginners. I did an article a year or two ago on blockchain technology, and I was very new to it, and I really started at that beginner level and worked my way up, and I found that really helpful. So I'm always happy to help people find resources. So if you're struggling, feel free to email me. My email address is on the Law Faculty website, and I can try to recommend some specific things if I know what level you're at. But I think universities have a real role to play here in helping our communities stay informed and stay educated, and that's important work that we need to support.
And I'll add a couple of examples that I've certainly seen and experienced. And I love this notion of learn and be curious. So back in the spring, we had a board member at a board dinner who was talking about the importance of generative AI. And we had some around the table who had never heard of the term, some hadn't tried it yet. And so sitting in real time said, I know this cut off at this time, this particular tool, which was ChatGPT, cut off in September of 21. And our current president of Marshall didn't join until January of 22. So he typed in and said, go back and look up all the ways that Brad Smith led it into it, the LinkedIn articles, the YouTube videos, the CNBC interviews, and tell us how he would approach his first year as president of Marshall University. And what it laid out was the exact blueprint of what I ended up doing when I came to Marshall. That caused a faculty member who was sitting there spending a little more time appropriately saying, how do we make sure this doesn't lead to plagiarism and cheating, went home that evening and typed in, please review the books that I've written and tell me what the main thesis is and what you think my next book should be based upon where I left off in this book. And she came in incredibly excited. And of course, that led to conversations where I had a policymaker from another state, not from West Virginia, who began to type in, if I put together a bill that went for this, what would be the general reaction that I would anticipate that I need to be prepared to overcome? And so ultimately, it really just, you start to use the tool, you experience it, any one of the tools, you start to find that there are very practical, pragmatic applications that will open your eyes and make you want to learn more, which is very exciting. So I cannot thank you enough on behalf of all of West Virginia, your companies, your educational institution, who I adore and love, have really helped advance our thinking here and our engagement. So please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists today. Mr. Speaker, we will yield the time back to you, my friend.
There we go.